Book TV recently visited Capitol Hill to ask members of Congress what they're reading this summer.
What I'm reading this summer, and it might take me all summer, is this commentary on Romans, on the book of Romans. And the reason I'm reading it is because it was, first of all, it was just given to me. I'm part of a Bible study, a members' Bible study here in the Capitol, and our teacher, Dr. Scott Redd, who's the president of the Reformed Theological Seminary here in Washington, D.C., is teaching us on Romans, and he gave us this wonderful commentary. Now, I've read biblical commentaries before, and they can give you like a headache, you know. This one's kind of what I would consider certainly intellectually solid, but also fairly pastoral, so it's relevant. It's part of what's known as the Bible Speaks Today series. So it tries to make it relevant to today as well as theologically and historically sound. But just so you know, what I have to do when I read something this wordy is I use my yellow highlighter to make sure that I it keeps my attention. It really helps, and it helps me go back and reference it as well. So that's what I'm reading this summer, and like I said, it's going to probably take me all summer because it's fairly dense.
What were some topics that were, in the modern context that really caught your attention in this book?
Yeah, so good question. Now, Romans is a very practical theological book, so while it's a deep theology on the one hand of the Apostle Paul, but he also writes to a church about correction and whatnot in some places. I think the thing that's the most relevant to me in this, and that's really enlightened by this commentary, in addition to the book of Romans itself, is this juxtaposition of grace and faith and works and salvation, and what Paul is the solid teacher on salvation by grace through faith alone. He's also quite instructive on not what's required, but what would be expected of people of faith who've received this free gift of grace. And that's I think it's a great theme, trying to find that balance of grace and works. So
how do we find that balance today, Congressman?
It's how you find it, in my view, is you go back to the book of Romans and keep reading it over and over and over and say, wow, this is really quite applicable. I need to be a little more gracious toward my opponents, or I'm working too hard to try to achieve something that's actually a free gift. But then if I accept this free gift, what's my responsibility in response to that free gift, if not to pass it on, so to speak? So I think it's pretty good instruction for all of us. And you don't have to be a Christian to understand the value of the teachings on grace and faith.
How do you find books that catch your attention?
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things about being in Congress is, there are really strict ethics rules and laws, and there are very few gifts you can accept. But the one gift that you can always accept is a book. And the reason for that is because it's always educational. So we get a lot of books given to us. We get a lot of books in the mail. I mean, many of the books on my shelf here are books that have been gifts, either from an author. So like Eric Metaxas, one of my favorite contemporary authors, he sent us his book that you'll find right up there that he published last year, on the Founding Fathers and the Triangle of Freedom. And it piqued my interest. I read his book last year, his biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which I think might be the best book I've ever read from my perspective. Deep history, deep theology, and then this more contemporary book on freedom that he wrote last year. And so that piqued my interest just because it was from him. It was a gift. I get lots of books from members, my colleagues that write books, and so I try to at least take a good look at those. I feel some obligation to that. I'm not a fiction guy. I mean, I've read a few novels. I can't even remember one right now. Probably the Pillars of the Earth was one that I can think of that was fiction. But for the most part, I look either for something instructional, educational, historical, theological, anything that ties all of that together. That's all the more interesting to me.
And these go into your book gifts as well, right?
They do. So, okay, good point. So, every year I give my staff a book. At Christmas time, this last year I gave them a book, Red Platoon, which is written by a friend of mine. He received the Medal of Honor in I think it was our first year here, 2013. It was like my first time doing, going to an event over at the Pentagon, and so. And it's a true story about his experiences that earned him the Medal of Honor. And so I gave that to him. A couple of years prior to that, I gave them Paul Ryan's book. Paul Ryan, wrote this sort of biography / political book about growing up in Janesville, becoming the vice presidential nominee. And this was before he became Speaker of the House. So I gave them that because that helps them get a sense of, what makes us Republican, how this place works, some of the frustrations of division and extremism, and anyway, so so when I read something I really like, I think this would be good for the staff. But when a North Dakotan writes a book, it's particularly it's particularly important.
Book TV wants to know what you're reading. Send us your summer reading list via Twitter @BookTV or Instagram @book_TV, or post it to our Facebook page, facebook.com/BookTV. Book TV on C-SPAN 2, television for serious readers.